Why can't Gen X women catch a good night's sleep? Is it the kids, the demanding jobs, their partners, or aging parents? Or is it the newest challenge in their lives, the onset of menopause? Hello, everyone. I'm Goldie, your host for today's episode.
And I'm Lakshan, your co host. And this is episode 23 of Mind the Gen Gap podcast.
In today's episode, we are putting the spotlight on a very special cohort of females that were born between 1965 and 1980 and are caught in a very unique time of their lives. I find that our experience of middle age differs significantly from that of our mothers and grandmothers. Generation X is a relatively small due to the baby bust, and now we are tasked with caring for the larger generations on either side of us, often while juggling full-time careers. While the term sandwich generation has been used since the 1980s to describe those caught between supporting aging parents and raising children, this imagery feels too mild for the pressures we face today in 2025. Instead, I prefer a more striking analogy. Rather than being pressed gently by soft bread, we are like being slammed between the heavy plates of the panini press, feeling the weight of our responsibilities bearing on us. This episode will be divided into three parts. Number one, the caregiving crisis. Two, navigating this crisis alongside the new Big M, which I will come to. And three, what can we do to help them, especially in the workplace? Part one, the caregiving crisis. Our parents and grandparents are living longer than ever before, and at the same time, Gen X women have full-time jobs or children who may at best be millennials that could be in their late 20s, but so many have Gen Zers who are navigating their high school or college years. This scenario puts the Gen X woman in real tug of war. On the one end, baby boomer parents are pulling on one side of the rope in this tug of war. Millennial and Gen Z children are pulling on the other. Because Gen X delayed having children, many are also facing difficulties with infertility or finding themselves raising very young kids in their 40s. While Gen X grapples with downward mobility due to rising costs, they are determined also to provide their children with advantages they didn't have themselves. Just a quick reminder, remember, this is the pragmatic and the skeptics of our generational hierarchy. So therefore, this generation of women find themselves balancing the responsibilities of caring for aging parents and dependents at home, in addition, also struggling to build their financial savings. According to a study by Nationwide, 56% of Gen X respondents reported financially supporting either their parents or their children. Approximately 20% of Gen Xers caring for a parent indicated that they are dealing with significant debt, with a similar percentage admitting that they are unable to save for retirement. It doesn't end there. A report from the insurance provider Guardian revealed that the number of US adults providing care for a spouse, older parent, or child with special needs has increased from 43.5 million in 2015 to 53 million in 2021. So far, what we can obviously see is a strain, both emotionally and financially. I am a Gen X myself, and I do have my own views on this. But from the outside, what are you observing, Lakshan?
Yeah, so I believe that Gen X women are probably the most underappreciated cohort amongst the more recent generations that we've spoken about, that we uh, cover in every episode in the podcast. And the reason I say that is because, well, my mom is Gen X. Right? When you said, at best, millennials who are in their late 20s, that was that. That would be me. And funnily enough, before we started recording this episode, I was just telling you, Goldie, that my mom's gone back to stay with the parents for about a month or so because she hasn't gone and visited them in like 10 years. They've come here, but she hasn't gone and visited her uh, where she grew up, basically, right? She seems to be having a great time there, being taken care of because she's been spending every single day of every single week, of every single month, of every single year for God knows how many years taking care of myself, my brother, and my dad. She would be the first person to wake up in the morning. This is when I was in school, making sure that all of us were taking care of ourselves and, uh, in the school bus on time, properly fed. She would wake us up for tuitions in the morning. I've seen her, make a lot of sacrifices. So, and I have also seen her not get as much appreciation as she should, and I feel like the appreciation only started coming later in life for her. That's why I feel the way that I feel about Gen X women, because having seen my mom that way. One thing that is different though, similar to you, Goldie, is that she became a young mother. So
Mm.
she had me when she was 23. So she this whole career woman thing was not a thing for her at all. She 23, she had kids, and her full time career, job, everything that takes all her time is the family, right? So um, yeah, having seen her and having seen other people around that cohort, I get a feeling that they are really the ones who um, tug of war is one thing. Tug of war would be being pulled on either sides. I would say more than tug of war, they are the ones pulling both sides to make sure that it's functioning properly. So that is the way I would describe uh, the Gen X woman. Um, yeah, that makes more sense to me. More than being in the middle of a tug of war, being pulled on either side, they are the ones who are pulling both the sides to make sure that we don't trip over and fall off and make a mess of ourselves. Fortunately, her parents are touchwood doing well health wise, but I do know that's not the case for a lot of parents of Gen X women, and to take care of that and deal with family and, as you mentioned, partners and children and
Mm.
all of that stuff. Um, it's like they look forward to going to bed because that's the only time they have for themselves, right? And I've seen that with my mom as well, but I feel like constantly being on the lookout for us uh, with respect to everything. I would say that she has become a very, very light sleeper because of that.
Mm.
So that I feel quite bad about because I'm a deep sleeper. Like when I pass out, I'm out. Oh my god, am I out? But she's not like that at all. Like even the smallest sound, she's up because she's always, tries to be cognizant and aware of everything that's going on at all times. So I know we were supposed to talk about the Gen X woman. I'm just going on talking about singing praise of my mom, but to me that is the quintessential Gen X woman. No, so it is putting willingly, unwillingly, uh, consciously, unconsciously, by choice or by responsibility, duty, putting themselves behind everything and everyone else.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think what I'm picking up in a very large way is the description of a Gen X woman to its core, which, your mum sounds like an incredible lady doing everything that she has done and continues to do. Um, if you didn't speak about it as a Gen X woman, I think we would maybe want to argue, and let me be devil's advocate here and say, well, don't all mums and grandmoms and even our ancestral sort of lineage has been like that? Yes, I definitely agree. But what's changed is that the boomer woman, for example, was not as career driven as the Gen X is. So that's an added, sort of layer on our generation cohort. And the other thing is this whole concept of what I'm going to speak about next, which was not so widely spoken about earlier. It definitely has always existed because it's a scientific change that occurs in our bodies. But what I'm trying to get to is that this tug of war that you talk about, or rather you mention it as them pulling on both directions, this creates a lot of exhaustion. And you quite rightly mentioned getting into bed is probably the most amazing gift you can give yourself. And that's how I neatly come into part two. So, with all the things that they do, can this produce what we call caregiver fatigue? Yes, it possibly is a real thing and needs to be spoken more about, but it also is combined with a complete transformation that also happens in these years, which is called the big M. It's the onset of menopause. If we speak to the average Gen X woman, I can pretty much guarantee you her favorite time of the day is when she gets into bed and finally gets to sleep. Now, why am I telling you this? In your mid to late 40s, it could happen earlier as well, the woman is experiencing a big shift in her body. The hormonal shifts, also known as entering menopause, and they can leave a woman feeling a wide array of effects like hot flushes, mood swings, and evident bodily changes. And with this journey comes a lot of need to rest, because that's the first thing that every OBG will tell you to do. Take more time for yourself. Give yourself time to rest and downtime. Now, self care needs to become a priority. And this is why nap time is their favorite time, or going to bed at night is their favorite time. However, like I explained in part one, for years, she has been tirelessly running around, prioritizing everyone else's happiness while her own needs, may have been left in the dust. The challenges of menopause have only intensified her feelings of sadness, depression, and confusion, and maybe general direction of her life. Now, I'm not saying that all women experience this, but those that do, because these are real symptoms, can feel them at a much more augmented level if they already have caretaker fatigue in their lives. So at this point, this woman, she's unsure of what truly brings her joy, having spent so long focusing on the needs of others, as you rightly mentioned, Lakshan, be it her husband or partner or her children, family members, or even her boss. Now, distinguishing her own preferences from the demands of those that she has cared for has become nearly impossible. She's normalized thinking about others first. This leaves her feeling quite lost and probably quite disconnected from herself. Now, in a time where she needs to connect the most with herself, there is possibly the biggest disconnect occurring. And how much of this does she even express? Culturally, we know women don't speak about certain topics. This one, for instance. And let's take a quick look at what expense this can create as well. I said, does she express herself? Now let me just give you an insight of the expense it can create. One study estimates that women in America between the ages of 45 and 65 spend an average of $3 billion annually to regulate and treat their menopausal treatments. The Journal of Occupational and Environmental Medicine found that women managing diagnosed menopause symptoms have significantly higher medical and pharmacy costs than other employees. We are learning, therefore, that navigating menopause is an expensive affair. Lakshan, you are a millennial man, and this is a crisis that I'm just telling you about. But honestly, does the Gen X woman appear on your radar in the same way as perhaps news about AI would?
Absolutely not. It's not even close. This is, I mean, it's like they say comparing apples and oranges. No, I think you're comparing apples and bricks. It's so
Yeah.
far away from being completely honest, because AI news comes like this, like multiple times a day, right? Uh, Gen X women, news about them, information about them, insights about them, about their health. No, not for me. Again, then again, it's true that I do live in India, and it's not spoken about anywhere close to how it would be in a lot of the West right now, which is a good thing in the West. Hopefully, we're getting there as well. And the reason I say this is because I mentioned this to you sometime back, which is that sometime in June of 2024, yeah, May June of 2024, my mom and I went to her gynecologist because she was experiencing some very, what do you say? It's very hard to describe symptoms, I suppose, because it's uh, during her periods. It was very very irregular, very very different from what it typically is like. So she wanted to go get that checked out, and first of all, the doctor was very happy that one a man is sitting and listening to whatever conversation is going on, trying to educate himself. Second, being that it's her son who's trying to learn all this stuff to be able to help her better. And as you said in the very beginning of this, one of the towards the early part of the section, about how typically, like, you go to your OBGYN and they'll tell you to take rest. No, that's exactly what happened in
Yeah.
this case as well, saying, oh, okay, you're like 50, 51 at that point. You need to take a break, you know. And she said, stop standing as much as you do, stop moving as much as you do, sleep more, sit down more, just don't strain and stress your body as much. Don't the first question she asked was, do you are you anxious, do you feel anxious, do you have anxiety, something like that. And my mom, she doesn't know what anxiety is. I had to explain to her. It's like stress because of some fear or thinking about the future and all that stuff. She's like, no, not really, no, whatever. But the first question was that because she checked her pulse. We went to a Ayurvedic doctor. She checked her pulse and asked her this question first. And of course, she was talking about all this stuff, and that's when she was explaining what was causing her symptoms. Which, by the way, apparently all of these irregularities are very very personal to each woman, so it's
Yes,
going to be very different for everybody. And when
absolutely.
she was taking her through all this stuff, I was like, God, like the machinery in women is so different from what it is like in a man. No, it's a lot more complex, and so many things could potentially go wrong. And that's when I got a deeper appreciation for all this stuff, and I learned a lot more about women's health and all that. And mom has been, she's at that perimenopause menopause period right now, so she talks about how what her flow is like. It's like sometimes it's like twice a month, sometimes it's nothing for 2 months, and it's very very odd and all that stuff. So again, all these things I got to know because I started, or rather the question was, how often does it come into my radar. No, this came into my radar because of that consult we did with the doctor. Otherwise, my awareness and understanding and exposure to women's health related whatever information basically is better than the typical guy. That's for sure. But still, compared to what is out there, what needs to be known, uh, yeah, I know too much about AI. Let's put it that way.
Well, now you know more than just about AI. um, I mean, wow. Like, firstly, kudos to your mum for, suggesting to you to accompany her. And number two, like, I'm so impressed. Full respect to you for taking the interest to go and sit and listen. And yes, you've said certain words today in the conversation which I don't hear the average man even pronouncing. Perimenopause. I mean, which man says that on a day to day in his vocabulary? I don't think so. Yet, you know what the funny thing is? These women that we're talking about are spending more than 8 or up to 10 hours of their days surrounded by people in the workplace. And this could be men. Correct. And I'm not saying that, they don't have female bosses. They probably do, and colleagues. And I think what I'm trying to get to here is it's an expensive affair because we've just discussed the emotional expense, both and the financial, expense. But what we don't understand is this dialogue is just not given enough exhibition, enough exposure. So the place these women spend the most time is in the workplace, in the day, I'm saying. How many employers are actually engaging in this conversation with them? Albeit from a well being angle. It's not like the sort of coffee conversation you're going to have, with your colleague. And now, when I speak about colleague, I'm not just targeting men here. Don't get me wrong. I'm speaking about millennial women, uh, probably a lot of Gen Z women who are surrounded in the workplace. Let's not forget the workplace is now comprising of up to 4 generations at a time, out of which one tiny, tiny cohort, but significantly important, are the Gen X women who are going through all this. Okay. Dr. Lakeisha McMillan, also known as the International Menopause Whisperer, she points out that the effects of menopause can significantly impact various aspects of life, especially for working women, which is what I'm talking about. They often find themselves grappling with increased absenteeism and reduced productivity at work. And the worst part, they can't even say why I'm absent from work because it's just not spoken about. Unfortunately, doctors, and I'm talking about professional doctors here, frequently oversimplify their symptoms, attributing them merely to the aging process. This is a true story. A lot of gynecologists don't give the importance or the weight to the tailor-made symptoms, the ones that you were mentioning earlier, Lakshan. Each woman can feel it very differently in her body. Okay. This leaves many women obviously feeling isolated, frustrated, and quite uncertain about, like, how am I supposed to navigate these myriad of changes that are taking place in their bodies, and not to mention the amount of work they have to do, because a lot of Gen X women are leaders and holding very high positions in the workplace. Recent data reveals that only 23% of Gen X women report their employers offering menopause related benefits, agreeing that menopause is not discussed in the workplace as frequently as it should be, with 55% of Gen Xers sharing this sentiment. That's over half. That's a very large number. So, options such as connecting employees with healthcare providers specializing in menopause, or offering financial assistance for medications not covered by standard insurance, could significantly alleviate the challenges faced by facing menopause. However, this is just the beginning of addressing the issue effectively. I personally feel this topic just needs to be taken out of isolation altogether and just discussed a lot more, just like we speak of the flu or any other health related issues. We find ourselves in a distinctive moment where millennials and Gen X comprise the majority of the workforce. Both generations recognize that employers would benefit from providing comprehensive menopause support. 86% of millennials and 82% of Gen Xers agree on this point. So we have more than a vast majority coming on an agreement for this. This presents employers with a timely opportunity to take proactive measures now, ensuring that future generations will feel supported and valued for years to come. Because let's not forget, this is not a problem. It's actually not a problem. It's just a reality that we need to normalize and make comfortable the situation for every woman that will go through it. As you can hear in my tone of voice, I feel quite strongly about this. What are you perceiving, Lakshan?
Yeah, I think that the fact that it's either not spoken about enough, or for whatever reason, either they're not comfortable speaking about it, or people are not receptive to it. I think it's quite stupid. Reason being that we are so comfortable and open about talking about things like politics, things that are very genuinely very
Yeah.
divisive, but something as a reality, as you mentioned, that's not spoken about because I don't know. Maybe there's that hush hush sentiment to it, and the other sentiment of what you mentioned about doctors saying, "Oh, it's a regular part of the aging process."
Mm.
It's not given its the weightage that it's supposed to be given, I believe. And again, the reason I say this is because when I'm thinking about again my mom's example,
Mm.
when she speaks to her general physician, no, and she says, "Hey, this is what I'm experiencing, feeling, and all that stuff." He says, "Okay, that's understandable. That's at this time of your life. That's the way it's going to be. Just have this." Iron supplement, basically iron and hemoglobin supplement for that portion, because when I mean you lose a lot of iron during the flow,
Mm-hmm.
and you
Right.
it contributes to becoming more anemic.
Yes.
So again, in his situation, again, general physician, with the knowledge that he has of my mom, he knows that this is a thing that's going to happen. You have to address the symptom before you address the root, and he knows that's not his place. So of course he recommends that she speaks to the OBGYN for anything beyond that. But when you mention that even doctors are, they don't seem to take it as seriously as they should as a reality.
Mm.
They take it, I think, on the face value of it's a reality, like, what can we do? This is the reality of life. But it doesn't have to be that way, right? I think that's the argument you're making in this third part of the episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, it's a reality, and we must embrace it, because it's also a very beautiful time when the woman should be very much connected to her own body and her mind. But like, why did we start this episode today? We started speaking about it because there's a lot of other layers that are contributing to the existence and the context of the Gen X woman. We began speaking about the caregiving crisis, which is about having to look after both one end and the other end of generations on between them, right? They're the sandwiched women, as we can say. But what adds to that is clearly, a health issue, which is but uh, normal, because it will arrive in the existence of all women at some point in their lives. And perhaps today we speak of, the Gen X woman going through this. Tomorrow we may have to speak about the millennial woman going through the same situation, because in her case, it'll be Gen X and Gen Z or Alpha that she's going to have to be looking after. But what remains completely certain is that this is not going away anytime soon. you know and so what's evident is that generational value shines through when we explore how each group tackles their unique circumstances. Today we zoomed into the Gen X woman and the overlapping challenges that they face, navigating emotional, financial, and health hurdles. But like I said, remember, millennial and Gen Z women will encounter similar issues down the line. So generational cycles tend to repeat, but it's up to us to recognize these patterns and choose how we discuss them and make them more available for dialogue. So let's keep this conversation going. We are always compassionate about recognizing the support each cohort can provide for younger or older generation, because that's how, you truly mind the gen gap, and the reason and the absolute foundation for this podcast, right? So in my closing, what I want to say is, if you enjoyed today's conversation, if you found yourself resonating with any of the topics that we have, discussed, or if you know someone who would enjoy, we'd love for you to share this episode. Don't forget also to give us a 5-star rating, because it really helps us to reach more listeners just like you. and viewers, of course. And most importantly, let's keep the dialogue alive. We want to hear your thoughts, drop us a comment, and join in this active conversation. Thank you for listening or watching until the end. We appreciate you. And with that, we've come to the end of episode 23 of Mind the Gen Gap podcast. I've been your host, Goldie.
And I've been your co host, Lakshan. Thank you so much for listening and watching, as Goldie said, all the way to the very end.
Muchas gracias.
See you in the next one.
Hasta pronto.
Bye.